The whole story began as a response to the single story that the media was sharing about the Black community, where you basically just assign one narrative to a community and then that's all they are. Hi, my name is Rachel Agboro and I'm director, curator of The Whole Story, where 5 individuals share personal stories to expand Black narratives.
There's a lot being said about us, so I think it's important to have narratives that are strong and rich and counter narrative to what's mainstream.
Being Black in America is being as authentic as I can be.
Stories inherently create empathy with the people that they're shared with. Tamir Rice happened in Cleveland in 2014, so that could have been me, really just a kid playing with a toy.
When people in the audience who don't look anything like the people who are sharing their stories, they can listen and connect with the experiences, the feelings, the emotions shared that's behind the stories.
My story was a journey throughout my life. In all of those different instances in my story, I was one of few Black people.
I feel like it's really important for African Americans to start telling their stories more so that we know who we are.
It's always important to just hear individual experiences because those individual experiences add to the whole story.
Welcome to The Whole Story Part 2! The whole story
Good evening, and welcome to our first virtual presentation of The Whole Story, Hey Mama edition here at Phoenix Art Museum. The Whole Story is a partnership with Phoenix Art Museum and was created by and continues to be led by my friend Rachel Agboro. My name is Nikki DeLeon, and I'm the Chief External Affairs Officer here at the museum. I'm going to pause for a second and make this sound stop. So just bear with me. Sorry. Okay, this should work better. My name is Nikki DeLeon. I'm the Chief External Affairs Officer here at Phoenix Art Museum. Each installment of The Whole Story, I get the opportunity to welcome everybody to the museum and to thank them for supporting both the museum and storytelling in Arizona. So for tonight, I have a little extra plug. If you would like to support the work of both the museum and the work that Rachel is doing with The Whole Story, if you're watching this at phoenixart.org, there's a donate button just above me. And if you're not and watching it on any other platform, pay attention to the comments because some opportunities for how to support Rachel, the museum, and the storytellers will appear there. So usually when I get to do this welcome, I get to ask everybody to turn off their cell phones. But I guess I don't have to do that tonight. And that's because instead of being in one space, we're all over the country, all over the city, all over the state. And so in these really odd times where everything seems kind of wrong in the world, there's something really right about the fact that amidst the challenges we're facing, that we've all been able to come together to listen to and to amplify stories of the Black experience in America, especially at a time when coronavirus is affecting the Black community more than any other community in our country. And especially to think and tell stories about mothers at a time when we're thinking about the mother of Ahmaud Arbery, who should be celebrating her son's birthday and instead is mourning his murder. So I think it's really powerful that we're all here together tonight. So without further ado, I thank you all again for coming together and being here. And I now get to turn it over to my friend and the magic behind The Whole Story, Rachel Agboro. Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. I'm so grateful to continue this partnership with the Art Museum, and many thanks to Christian for encouraging me to give the digital stage a try. Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie talks about the danger of a single story in her TED Talk, and we all know what the single story is about the Black community. And on this day that would have been his 26th birthday. I'm sending my thoughts and prayers, and I'm sure you're all joining me in sending our thoughts and prayers to Wanda Cooper, the mother of Ahmaud Arbery. While we continue to mourn and cry and protest at the injustice of being Black in America, we must continue to tell our stories to be whole. As we continue to tell our stories, we find hope, we find solidarity, and we find a path forward. And for the first time, I'm excited to connect with each of you across the US. And I know some of my folks in Nigeria are also tuning in, so hello. And speaking of Nigeria, a thing that I like to do to start off the live show, which I'm going to teach you all tonight, is a little calm response that my uncle taught me. It's something that Nigerian griots or storytellers say to start a story. So why don't we bring the other storytellers on screen with me so that I have an audience. These storytellers have told on the Whole Stories physical stage since we started in 2017, and I'm so glad each of you said yes to telling your story. So hello, Theresa, Quinton, Alexis, Gaggi, thanks for joining me tonight.
Yes, thank you.
All right. So here's how it goes. I say story, story twice, and there's directions there. So Rachel says story, story. Then you will all say story once. I'll say once upon a time, and you will all say time twice. And you at home, same for you. I expect to hear you, loud and clear, hear you in this calm response. So let's just do a practice round first, and then we'll do it for real. All right, so here we go. Story, story.
Story. Story.
Once upon a time.
Time.
Yes, good. I know there's some delay probably with internet speed. So let's just do it one more time. Everyone all together across the US, across the world. Story, story.
Story.
Once upon a time.
Time.
Nice. What I love about this calm response is that it automatically builds connection and gets everyone on the same page, which is the beauty of storytelling. So our first storyteller is a fellow Nigerian who lives in Boston, Massachusetts. Theresa Akopian is a yoga teacher, social worker, storyteller, and she's also the co-host of Stories from Stage. Please welcome Theresa with her story, My Mother is Beautiful and Perfect, and I Look Just Like Her. Theresa, take it away.
Long before I was ever old enough to be trusted with a hot curling iron, I had a jerry curl. Now, perhaps you're familiar. A jerry curl is a crimpy perm with a watery drip. You could Google image search Ice Cube's character in Boys in the Hood if you would like a visual example of this. Now, maybe there were non-Black people who also had jerry curls, but I definitely did not know any of them. In fact, almost all of the Black kids at my elementary school had a jerry curl. Now, granted, 3 of the 4 Black kids at my elementary school were me and my big sister and my little sister. So my mom also had a jerry curl, and her hair was cut into an afro because my mom always had an afro. And since my family, my immediate family, were the only Black people that I was having regular daily contact with, I just assumed that my jerry curl was exactly the way that Black hair was meant to be worn. The only problem is that I didn't actually like my jerry curl. I wanted mermaid hair. I wanted my hair to be soft and dry and bouncy. I wanted it to blow in the wind and flick over my shoulder. I wanted good hair. I wanted white girl hair. And so by the time I got into high school, I began chemically relaxing my hair, straightening it out, and using this large barrel curling iron to flip out the bottom of it. My mom started to call me retro because I was wearing my hair in the way that women from the 60s and 70s used to wear their hair. Or rather, I was wearing my hair in the way that white women in the 60s and 70s used to wear their hair. Now, my mom came to the United States from Ghana in 1969, which was the height of the Black Panther Party movement. My mom and the women of the Panther Party would wear their hair in afros, these round sculptural crowns that surrounded their heads. Afros are perhaps the very definition of Black hair. They grow out and not down. They are poised but not tamed. They take up space and they make a statement about defiant Black beauty, even if the woman wearing them is saying nothing. Now, my mom was by no means a member of the Black Panther Party. My mom is a very quiet woman. She avoids conflict. She's not one to cause a stir, and if she is quiet or silent in a room, she can easily be mistaken for not having an opinion. But I have to imagine that my mom's hair was indeed an intentional statement, because Black women's hair takes up so much time. From way back in elementary school, when I had that jerry curl, I and my big sister and my little sister and my mom, we started going to these Black hair salons every couple of weekends for hours. And we would get there as early as possible, because at least back then at a Black hair salon, you want to get the earliest appointment that you can get, because your appointment time is not the time that anybody is going to start to do your hair. Your appointment time is the time that you are expected to just be present in the waiting room, waiting, flipping through years old issues of Vibe and Ebony magazine with all of the corners dog-eared, waiting for your name to be called. And sometimes it was hours before I would hear my name. But once I did, I would follow the stylist and climb into the chair and begin the process of pain. The hairstylist would begin by parting my hair, usually into 4 or 5 evenly sized sections. And then she would take this goopy mayonnaise-like chemical substance and start to apply it evenly to each tuft of hair. She would start at the midsection of each tuft and then slowly and methodically work her way towards the tips, allowing the chemical to fully penetrate into each strand of hair. She would leave the scalp for last, because as soon as that chemical would hit my skin, it would go all the way through the skin, wrap itself around the root of the hair, and that is when the burning starts. And you have to let it burn for a little bit for it to really work. But you want to tell them as soon as it starts to burn, because otherwise it's going to go on for too long and it will become absolutely unbearable. But don't cry about it, because only babies are tender-headed. After it's been burning for long enough, the hairstylist would take me over to the shower bowls, and then she would start to rinse this warm water over my head, rinsing the burn away. She would start to massage with her fingertips into my scalp, and when that was done, she would take me over to the dryers. These hot dryers turned on as high as possible, and it felt like I was sitting there for another several hours again. And that is why Black salons are always so hot, because of all that time spent under the dryers, all of that time in pursuit of a single goal: hair that looks like everybody else's hair, hair that fits the mold, hair that is tamed like everyone else. Everyone, that is, except for my mom. My mom wore her afro proudly until the 1990s, when chemotherapy took it away. I can remember this moment sitting with her in her bathroom. I would have been perched on top of the closed toilet seat, and I was looking at her, at her ever shrinking frame of her body as she looked at her own reflection in the mirror. And this was a reflection that she no longer recognized as the double-breasted, fully crowned one that she used to see there. We were talking about how the chemo was going to take her hair away, and she was saying how she was going to get ahead of it, and she was going to cut off her own hair for herself. My mom is always teaching me lessons like this, life lessons. And this one was that sometimes being in control and taking control of a situation means accepting your fate as it is. Now, it would be a much nicer narrative if I could tell you that it was in this moment that I decided to cut off my chemically processed hair and start to go natural, like an homage to my mother who was losing her crown, but that would be a lie. In fact, I can tell you that that very morning that I was sitting in her bathroom, I had burned my chemically straightened hair further into submission with a wide barrel curling iron. And it would be years before I would begin to go natural. Because going natural takes time. And it took me time to accept my own fate of my hair, to accept this concept of beauty. Even though my mom was the most beautiful woman that I knew, I needed to accept that I had my mom's hair. I had Black girl hair, and I needed to let go of that stupid dream I had of having white girl hair, hair that would be soft and dry and bouncy, hair that would flip over my shoulder, because I was never going to have hair like that. I'm a Black girl, and nappy doesn't move like that. Thank you.
Yay, nappy doesn't move like that. That was powerful when you shared it last year at part 10, and it's still powerful today.
Thank you.
My favorite line that you said was, it took time for me to accept this concept of beauty growing out of my own head. And you're so right. You know, self-acceptance does take time, and sometimes it takes a lifetime. And I know you're speaking to a lot of Black women who have been through this experience or still going through it, or even other folks who are just learning how to accept their whole selves. It is certainly a process. So Theresa, thank you for sharing your story.
Thank you.
And yes, thank you. And for you out there, don't let this week fool you. I am team natural under here. So our next storyteller is Dr. Quinton Boies. He lives in Phoenix, Arizona with his wife, his 2 daughters and son. And that's all I'm going to say about him because I don't want to give it away. I'll tell you his story. So Quinton, let's get you on here. He originally told his story at part 4 in 2017. And his story is called Dear Mom. Take it away, Quinton.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Super excited, super happy to be here. Just shout out to my mom and also my wife and also any and every mom. As we know, Sunday is Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day. Dear Mom. As a kid, I remember my mom working multiple jobs to make ends meet, to provide for her and I. And I can't say that I appreciated that as a kid like I do now as an adult. But one thing I do remember as a kid is that we were always late for everything. There was one morning, and it started out like every other morning, trying to rush out the house to get me to school on time. I remember we left the house, we were fighting traffic, we pulled up right in front of the school, just minutes before the bell was set to ring. I kissed my mom goodbye, I jumped out the car, and I ran. I ran into the building, and I ran up the stairs. Scarf dangling behind me, snot plastered to my nose because of the cold Chicago air. I ran. I got to the very top stair, and I tripped. My book bag went in one direction. My lunchbox went in another direction as I face planted right in front of the classroom door. Mrs. Edwards, my 4th grade teacher, who was the meanest person I knew at age 9, came walking out and said, "Quinton, you're late again. Get in class." And while being late was never my fault as a kid, I always ran. I ran because I never wanted to let my mom down. You see, for my mom, the most important thing was for me to do well in school. And even though we didn't have a lot, she always worked multiple jobs to send me to private school because my neighborhood options just weren't that great. And the tough part is that while I had access to amazing opportunities at these schools, I always did just enough to get by. Not too little, because I would have gotten in trouble, but not too much, because I would have raised eyebrows and expectations. There was one time later in my middle school career, my grades started to slip. And my mom had the bright idea of calling a parent-teacher conference, which was me, her, and all of my teachers in the same room at the same damn time. Now, I would have preferred to go through a voluntary circumcision procedure as opposed to go to that meeting. I'll never forget the night before I could not sleep. I laid in my bed thinking, how can I make sure that my mom is late one more time? And as I laid there, I got an idea. I thought if I take a metal butterfly clip and open it in such a way that I could connect it to a wooden clothespin, I could take that device and shove it into the wall power outlet to short circuit the fuse, resetting her alarm clock, thus canceling her alarm. Genius. I had my plan. I would get up 15 minutes early the next morning to pull off my heist. And the next morning I got up. And while I didn't die from electrocution, I almost died from the wrath of my mom after that meeting. Later in high school was more the same. I did just enough to get by. Not too little because I would have got in trouble, but not too much because I would have raised eyebrows and expectations. I remember the fall semester of my senior year, it was time to make the final decision about going off to college. And in my household, it was never about if, it was more about where. And I made the decision I wanted to go to college in Arizona because my brother, my dad, and sister, they lived here. And I would only see them historically twice a year. I remember I made a special trip out to Arizona that fall to go visit the 3 in-state universities to decide where did I want to go. My first stop went to Flagstaff and visited NAU and quickly realized I'm trying to get away from cold weather and snow. So I couldn't go to NAU. I then went to Tucson to visit the University of Arizona. And after living in Chicago, there was no way I could live in Tucson, more infamously known as the anus of the earth. So by default, it was Arizona State University. And not because I was loyal or a fan of the Sun Devils, but just because the other 2 options sucked. I got back home, I filled out my application, and I submitted it to Arizona State University. I was immediately excited to start this new chapter of my life. But at the same time, I had to hide my enthusiasm because it was all really difficult for my mom. Her only son going off to college, but not just college, one that's on the other side of the country. At school, I was immediately a star. All of my friends were going to college somewhere in the Midwest, with the most exotic place being Kalamazoo at Western Michigan University, but not me. I was going to Arizona State, and people knew that was a party school. All my friends, all my partners, they would ask, what is it like? And I lied. I made up stories. I said, man, it's so hot in Arizona, the girls go to class naked. All right, not naked, but they don't wear no tops. My boys were like, no tops? I was like, yeah, no tops. I spent the next month waiting for my admission information from Arizona State University so I would know which dorm I was assigned. I spent time planning every hour of every day of the freshman-only orientation week. I circled events that I wanted to visit and attend during that orientation week on a calendar that I swiped when I made my visit. Then one day it happened. I got home, and I always got home before my mom. I checked the mail, and in the mail was a letter from Arizona State University. It was time. I was excited. I grabbed my letter. I ran in the house. I ran to my room. I sat on the bed. I ripped the letter open and I read it out loud. Dear Mr. Boies. They're already calling me Mr. in Arizona. All right. We regret to inform you that you have not been accepted to Arizona State University. We regret to inform you you've not been accepted. Not been accepted. What the hell? Was I the first person in history to not get accepted to Arizona State University? I just sat there, dumbfounded, reread the letter several times. I didn't get in. I didn't get accepted. Hours went by and I just sat there, never moving, shocked. I didn't get accepted. Years of finally just getting by caught up with me. I felt like my life was over. I only applied to one school. It was my first choice and my safety school. And now I have no place to land. After some time, I shook it off and I said, you know what? I'll figure it out later. I'll figure it out later. I hit the letter and went back to my normal routine. My mom got home later that night and I said nothing. I went to school the next day and I said nothing. Decided I was going to just fake the funk, just live it up and just live it live. At the same time, those end of the year college celebrations were starting to pick up. And I did my best to dodge any question that had to do with college or going to Arizona to attend Arizona State University. I did that for a while. So about a month after my denial letter, I started going through a cycle of grief and I had shifted from being upset to pissed. I was mad at ASU. So one night I decided I'm going to go home and I'm going to write a strongly worded letter to ASU. I got home that night, I got my pen and my paper and I wrote a letter to whom it may concern. Now, you know you mean business when you start out with whom it may concern. To whom it may concern. And I proceeded to tell them why they made a mistake and not taking a shot on me. I told them grades and test scores don't capture the entire story of a person. I told them how I always used to run when I was late as a kid, even though it wasn't my fault. I told them I never gave my mom trouble because I know she made a bunch of sacrifices to provide opportunities for me as a kid. I told them I never did anything wrong, although I had ample opportunity as a latchkey kid. And I ended my letter by saying, ASU, you suck. I folded my handwritten letter back up. I put it in the envelope that my denial letter came in. I readdressed it and I sent it off. Now, the adult me knows that the then president of ASU, Latticore, did not personally write me a denial letter. And it probably came from some central processing plant. But to the 17-year-old version of me, it didn't matter. I needed to get some stuff off my chest. I needed to validate myself and understand my own value. So I did, and I felt better. About 5 minutes. But then I realized when reality crept back in, I still hadn't told anybody. I had nowhere to go. I had no place to land. I wasn't going off to college. I gave myself a week. I said, in 1 week, I'm going to tell my mom. I'm going to tell her. That week came and went, and I still didn't have the balls to tell her. But I was still attending all the end of the year celebrations and the parties and the festivities. I was living it up. I was faking the funk, and I was living a lie. By now, we're quickly approaching May, and it's starting to get real. I have to tell people there's nowhere for me to go. I made another attempt. I gave myself another deadline. I said, I'm going to tell my mom. For real this time. For real this time. I'm going to tell my mom in a week on Saturday. That's what I said. Promised myself. That week went by faster than any week in my life. Monday went by. Tuesday went by. Wednesday went by. And on Thursday, I got home from school like normal before my mom, and I checked the mail. And in the mail, there's another letter from Arizona State University. I immediately got upset. You already denied me. What more? What more do you got to say? I took the letter. I walked through the house. I went to my room. I sat on my bed, and I opened it. And I read it again out loud. Dear Mr. Boies, here we go with the Mr. thing again. We are pleased to inform you that you've been accepted to Arizona State University on conditional probationary terms. I've been accepted. I've been accepted. Thank you.
Woo! Yay, Quinton! Why don't you tell us how you originally ended that story in 2017?
Yeah, so in 2017, that was the only second time I told that story out loud. First time I told it to a kid who was having a difficult time. And when we were live at the art museum, I read the story, and at the end, it said, the most amazing thing about this story is that tonight, it's the first time my mom's hearing it. So I told her, and she learned with a bunch of people in the audience, 20 some odd years later, I don't want to date myself, and she learned that story.
I remember everyone kept turning around to get a look at your mom because she happened to sit in the back because I think she was late to the show, right?
Yes, that's my mom. Of course she was. Of course she was
when
late.
you were telling your story.
Of course she was late.
Yeah, your mom's name is Alicia, right? Is she listening right now or watching?
Her name's Alicia. I did tell her about it, yeah. But I'm sure she's probably just logging in.
Is that a comment?
Because she's always late.
Oh, someone says excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So I know that you've had some recent developments that are really exciting. Your shirt kind of alludes to it. Why don't you also share what happened last year so we can cheer and celebrate?
No, I appreciate it. So last year, I was super fortunate and blessed. I've been working in Phoenix Junior High School District for about 15 years and started as a teacher and made it all the way up to the executive team after being a principal at a few schools. And I got approached about taking on a new endeavor. And so now I am about a year and a half into a new role as the superintendent of Roosevelt School District, which it is right in the middle of South Phoenix. And I had loved my previous job. But Roosevelt is densely populated with beautiful Black people. And so to be able to go be a leader in that community and lead that district where there are so many students that look like you and I has been truly a blessing. So I've been in that role as superintendent for now about a year and a half, and I love every minute of it. So every time I get to promote and brand my district, really working hard to change the narrative of South Phoenix and Roosevelt.
Yeah, and I can see the pride, and we're definitely proud of you being the first Black superintendent of Roosevelt School District. A long time coming, and hopefully not the last, right? You know, same thing that we say about the presidency, right? So
no, I appreciate it.
Thank you, Quinton, for sharing your story. And there you go, 2020 seniors. You never know what could happen if you advocate for yourself and you speak up. So don't give up. And as Quinton says, validate your own value. So our next storyteller is Gaggi Thompson. He is a native of St. Louis, Missouri, and Gaggi currently resides in Phoenix, Arizona, where he's an author, an entrepreneur, and founder of Felon 2.0, which is an empowerment program designed to help others break free from their self-imposed prisons and enjoy life beyond the walls. So here is Gaggi, who also shared his story with Quinton in 2017 at part 4, and his story is called The Great Cherry. Thank you, Gaggi, for being with us. Take it away.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Rachel. I appreciate it. I always love to be a part of the whole story. Thank you for this beautiful platform. It's awesome. I always enjoy Quinton's story. May 28th, 1971 was a great moment. I mean, it was the day that Paul McCartney released his second album. It was the day that the great basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar got married. But more importantly, It was the day I was born. You see, I was born to a young mother, age 16, my twin brother and I. That was her third child. By the age of 20, my mother had 5 children and had been married twice. My mother had, needless to say, she had to drop out of school because she had a growing family. So she didn't have a lot of formal education. But this woman had a PhD in streetology. I mean, she can hustle. She knew them streets. She knew how to make that money. I mean, my mother, she was something. And I remember growing up, my mother, she was my shero. She was the person that I looked to for strength and guidance. I mean, her ability to survive, her resilience was admirable to me as a young man. My mother was the go-to person in our neighborhood. I mean, if your daughter got pregnant at a young age, call Cherry. She knew what to do about that. I mean, after all, she was an OG at getting pregnant as a teenager. If you had some static, you had some trouble, some drama, call Cherry. I mean, she carried 2 big old guns and wasn't scared to use them. If your water got turned off, hell, call Cherry. She knew how to turn your water back on. I mean, this woman was the go-to person in the hood. So I grew up looking at my mother being the person that everybody turned to, that many people turned to in our family and the community, because she was strong. And it seemed like she always knew what to do. Now, me, on the other hand, I was a wayward child. I was something else. I was more than a handful. I was 2 handfuls, 2 feet, and probably a backpack. That's the kind of trouble I got into, in and out of juvenile, run away from home at least 6, 7 times before age 14, a drug rehabilitation center. I mean, getting shot at. I mean, just into all kind of trouble. Well, as a sophomore in high school, going into my junior year, I wound up getting into a lot of trouble. And I wound up being sentenced and spending the next 7 years behind bars. And I remember while I was there, I was like a sheep among wolves. I was young, but I was strong. But still, I was in a hell of a situation, very dangerous environment that had me in Supermax, where people didn't care nothing about taking your life. People didn't care nothing about your emotions, because in that environment, emotions was a weakness. So you wasn't permitted to express no emotions, because nobody cared about what was going on with you emotionally. All they was concerned about was that time. And I remember over the years, I would call my mother and collect call from the Department of Correction and she wouldn't answer. I'm confused, like, man. I would call again, collect call from the Department of Correction, click. Maybe she changed the number or something. Let me write her a letter. So I began to write a letter to my mother. I wouldn't get no response. And I'll write another letter and I wouldn't get no response. About my 4th or 5th year into prison, I received a letter from my mother. And she was in a drug rehabilitation center. You see, she started getting high on her own supply. She was a hustler when I was coming up. When I say hustler, I'm talking about pistols, Cadillacs, and gold teeth. That was my mother. But she started getting high on her own supply. And I didn't know that. All I knew was the image of the strong Cherry, the warrior, the one that everybody turned to. That's the mother that I knew coming up. And that's who I was making collect calls to. That's who I was writing my letters to, but to no avail. I didn't get a response. I developed an extreme hatred for my mother. I disconnected myself totally from the outside world emotionally. I had severed all ties emotionally from the outside world, because I had to think in an environment where emotions were considered a weakness, and sometimes it can cloud your judgment and cloud your perception. So I couldn't be too emotional. So I became subhuman, and I functioned for many years almost like a robot with no emotions, just functioning intellectually, just functioning out of logic, right? And I remember August 28, 1995, it was time for me to be released. And my mother and my younger brother, Bruce, they came to pick me up, and he had his daughter with him, my little niece. And I got this hatred on the inside of me. Like, man, I called you and you didn't answer. I mean, I wrote you and you didn't respond. You know, I didn't say nothing, but because I was happy to be out. I was happy they came to get me, but the ride home was very unusual. I was sitting in the back seat with my little niece, and I'm looking at her, and when I left, my little brother was young, and when I come out, he got babies, and I'm looking at my little niece, and I'm like, hey girl, I'm your Uncle Red, and she's looking at me like, who is this old loud talking man in my car? She'd never seen me before, but I was happy to be out. We stopped at a little gas station, and I seen the dog, and I was like, I ain't seen a dog in 7 years. I wanted to see, I think it was a Rottweiler, but it didn't make no difference to me. I just wanted to see a dog. I was happy to see a dog and squirrels, and I was excited to see things that we often take for granted, right? For years, I kept that bottled up in me, my hatred and my disdain. And my mother, I watched her over the years go between what I call between crack and Christ. Sometimes when she was on point, strong, she was that strong cherry. When she was in church and she was doing good and she was out in the community recruiting all the other drug addicts and bringing them to church, and man, that leadership, the cherry that I knew, I would see that. But then at times she would succumb to the addiction, and she would leave Christ and go back to the crack. And it would be weak, and I would see her in that state, and all that time I'm not moved by none of this emotionally because I have no emotions. When I came home for the first 4 years, I had children every year for the first 4 years. I like to tell people I had to make up for lost time. I was gone for a while. Don't judge me, but I had to make up for lost time. And as fate would have it, God blessed me to get custody of all 4 of them children. So I was a single dad for about 6 years, raising my 3 sons and my daughter. And I believe that God blessed me with my children to reawaken in me a level of humanity that prison had robbed me from. It had took that away from me, because I had to, at some point again in my life, be concerned about people other than myself. I had to love and respect and nurture somebody other than myself. It wasn't me against the world no more. I had children, and I believe God blessed me with them children to quicken in me once again that human side, that humanity side, that part of me that was coming alive. So one day I was listening to a lecture from the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan on atonement. And in his lecture, he was talking about that if you had trouble with someone and they offended you and they hurt you, to go to that person, point out the area that they hurt you in, point out the wrong, let them know how you feel, so y'all can clear the air and start afresh, take the relationship to another level where it won't be severed ties. So I said, I'm gonna do that. I remember I got in my car in St. Louis. I rode out to the county area. My mother lived in the little county. And I'm rehearsing in my mind how I'm gonna say this to my mother. I'm gonna tell her how I feel. I'm gonna let Cherry know how I feel, because I don't wanna keep this in my heart and in my mind no more. I wanna get this up off my chest. I wanna atone with my mother, because I wanna be able to empathize and sympathize, and I wanna be able to feel her pain. But right now I can't, because collect call from the Department of Correction, and click, I wrote you letters and you didn't respond. I can't feel it right now. So I remember pulling up to the parking lot, getting up out the door, opening the door and knocking on the door. And she was cooking at the time. I can remember like it was yesterday. I walked into the house, it was smelling good. She was cooking some fried chicken and some macaroni and cheese. I'll never forget it. And I said, hey, mama. She said, hey, baby, what's going on? Gave me a kiss on the cheek. I gave her a hug. I said, Mom, I want to talk to you. She said, what's going on, baby? And she was stirring the chicken. She was turning the chicken over in the hot grease. I'm smelling the chicken, and I'm debating to myself, do I tell her before or after I get this plate? Should I talk to her before? This mama's cooking. That's all I'm saying. Mama can burn. So I'm debating to myself, do I tell her how I feel before I get this plate or after? She said, what's going on, sweetie? I say, Mama. She looked at me. I said, I hate you. My mama looked at me. She put her hands on that skillet with that grease, like she's been throwing it in my face. And I said, hey, hold on, because this Cherry now, she don't play. I said, hold on, let me explain to you why. I say, Mama, when I got locked up, I needed you. I called. You didn't answer my calls. I wrote you. You never responded. I mean, you didn't come see me. You didn't send me money. You didn't, I mean, it was rough in that, right? And what my mother said blew my mind. Her response, my mother looked at me with tears running down her face. And she said, son, when you got locked up, it was absolutely nothing I could do about that. No street credibility, no money, nothing that I can do. I talked to lawyers, wasn't nothing going to get you about that situation. You was definitely about to go to prison. And she said, because I wasn't the most spiritual person at that time, I didn't turn to God. I didn't start praying. She said, I started smoking drugs to escape the pain of what my son was about to go through. Oh man, my heart dropped. I'm thinking I'm justified in my pain. I'm thinking this anger is justified. Damn it, you weren't there for me. I needed you. You my mother. You was there for everybody else when I grew up. You was there for everybody, but you weren't there for your oldest son. I'm thinking I'm justified in holding that. And here she telling me that your little delinquent behavior was one of the contributing factors of me becoming a drug addict, me becoming addicted to crack, because I wanted to escape the pain, because I didn't know if you was going to live or die in that. I didn't know if I was going to ever see you again, and I loved you, son. So I didn't pray. I started smoking because I wanted to escape the pain. I didn't want to remember. I didn't want to think about it. So I started smoking more and more and more. Oh, my heart dropped. And I hugged my mother, and we atoned. And I said, man, I love you, Mom. Man, I love you. And years later, before she passed away, this is the power of atonement. I was here in Phoenix, Arizona. I left St. Louis, been there 14 years. I moved out St. Louis, moved with my family here to Phoenix. And I just got that feeling that something was going on with Mom. You know, I had to go to St. Louis. And she had been dealing with cancer and, you know, struggling with the addiction. But this woman was resilient and she was strong. I mean, she'd been on hospice like 2-3 times. You know, I mean, she'd go to hospice and come back off. They give her 6 weeks to live. She'd come back off. This woman was strong. But this particular time in 2016, she was on my mind, so tough. I told my ex-wife, I said, man, I got to go see Mom. I got to go to St. Louis. She said, well, what's going on? I said, I got to go see her. Now, we had seen her in horrible situations before. She bounced back up out of it. So, you know, it wasn't nothing. This is the great cherry. But this particular time, I got my plane ticket. I flew down there. I didn't tell my family I was coming. The only one who knew I was coming was my big sister, who I stay with when I go to St. Louis. She the only one knew I was coming. And my family didn't even know I was down there. They seen me taking pictures with Mom and putting them on Facebook. And they're like, you in St. Louis? I'm like, yeah, you know. And I had a chance to spend like 4 or 5 days with Mom and talking to her and, you know, feeding her and things like that. And when I flew back to Arizona, 2 days later, it was during this month of Ramadan. How ironic. It was during this month of Ramadan 4 years ago. I had just broke my fast, ate my food, and I get a phone call from my big sister. And she said, Mom just died. Oh man, my heart dropped. And my family say, man, she was calling, her spirit was calling for you. She wanted to see you again before she died. But I knew because of atonement, I knew that because I had got that up off of me, I knew that at that point it was a line, a spiritual connection, once again, between mother and son. I didn't hold that hatred and that anger and that pain no more. I let it go. And because I let it go, I was able to feel her pain. I was able to hear her cry. And I responded. And that she was there for me when I was young. She wiped my little snotty nose and cleaned my little dirty butt. I was there for her in the end, wiping her face and smiling with her and feeding her. And I realized that the great Cherry lived. Thank you.
Thank you, Gaggi. Wow. Beautiful story. Thank you so much. And, you know, we would not be who we are without the people who raised us. And thank you for sharing about Cherry. We see a comment here from Tia. She says, oh, this story here, this story about Black mothers and their children almost never get told. So yeah, thank you, Gaggi, for sharing your story. One point that a friend messaged me is she wants to know the story about the lion behind you.
The lion?
Yeah, what's going on
I'm
there?
a warrior. Cherry made me a warrior. She was the mother lioness. She just made me like that. So I just like lions.
Yeah, me too. I actually have a similar lion that we had in our house growing up. So
Right.
Thank you, Gaggi, for sharing
Thank
about
you.
the great Cherry.
Yes, ma'am.
So I know Mother's Day isn't a celebration for everyone. It can be a pretty tough day. So if that's you, just know that you are cherished, you are loved, and you are not alone. And our final story for tonight is Alexis Road. She is a writer, artistic theologian, and a revolutionary artist who currently lives in Raleigh, North Carolina. She also produces live storytelling events herself through Unshackled Productions and Truth Meets Story. We originally heard her story on The Whole Story Part 7 in 2018, and it is called Crazy Aunties. So please welcome Alexis Roan to share her story about the two most important women in her life.
Thank you, Rachel. I have so enjoyed hearing all of the stories about people, just the beautiful stories of moms. And but tonight I'd like to pay homage to two women, my two maternal angels. In fact, I am a reverently irreverent minister because of 50 years of influence by my hyper-religious mother and my crazy auntie. She's my mama's baby sister. They're about 3 years apart. And most of my life, they've not lived more than 2 miles apart, but they're very different. Mama loves Jesus Christ and Hillsong worship music. Auntie loves Jesus Christ and Johnny Taylor. May he rest inside the walls of soul heaven. They're so funny. Both of them worked for their employer for about 40 years. Mama put on a business suit and went to work every day. And Auntie put on a post office uniform and went to work every day. When they got older and their hair began to turn gray, both of them had way too much youthful swag to carry that look. So they dyed their hair. Mama dyes hers black. And Auntie, well, she dyes hers anywhere on the spectrum of red, from auburn to candy apple. And finally, both of them have a Bible that they carry with them everywhere they go. Mama has one of them big study Bibles with the gold tabs that mark every blessed section from Genesis to Maps. And Auntie has one of them little Gideon Bibles with just the New Testament plus the Psalms and the Proverbs. And I promise you, wherever she is tonight, I bet she got that Bible with her. It's in the corner pocket of her purse next to her MAC blot powder. I am the perfect socially engineered mix of these two women. And that was made crystal clear on December 12, 2012. I was in Houston for my goddaughter Destiny's 12th birthday. So on 12/12/12, Destiny's turning 12. We're having a big family dinner party for that evening. And Mom and I were out, earlier that day shopping for the party. We're in Mom's car, she's driving, and the radio is tuned to the contemporary Christian station. Now, I grew up listening to this station. Back then, the messages were husbands, love your wives, wives, honor your husbands, children, obey your parents. If these three people would just stay on task, then we'd have stable families and stable communities. Stable society allows a stable world, right? I used to love that message. But I issued a pink slip to Christian radio in the early 90s. It was during the Bill Clinton era when everything suddenly became very political and vitriolic. And frankly, I didn't like the way I felt at the end of each program. So I traded Amy Grant and Sandy Patty for Ice Cube and Dr. Dre. I just felt like the gangster rap stations were more inspirational. But Mom, she was a devoted listener. So we're in her car, and the minister is wrapping up his sermon. He's approaching 5 minutes to the top of the hour, and suddenly I panic. They are getting ready to go into the news briefs. Now, what Christian radio did to Bill Clinton is nothing compared to the way they skewered Barack Obama. It was like every sermon, every news story, every fact they uttered had one goal. It was to make that brother a one-term president. And the truth was negligible. It didn't matter if it was true or not, which is why every time they said something foul, I would completely come out of myself. I was never willing to engage my better angels at that time. My anxiety is just about through the roof, and I'm hyperventilating until it occurs to me. Today is December 2012. The election was last month. He won his second term. So I chillax a bit, confident that they're going to have to find something else to talk about. The newscaster comes on. First story, first sentence. He says, a recent study has shown by the year 2050, white Americans will be the minority in this country. And I'm thinking that's not new research. In 1995, Farash Hadia wrote a book called The Color of Our Future. Said the exact same thing. It's not new. Second sentence. This has been attributed to President Obama's failed economic policies. And before I can gather myself, I point to the radio, turn to my mama and yell, did you hear what that motherfucker just said? My mama whips her neck in my direction. Her eyes narrow, her tough little curls over her teeth. She says, don't you dare use that kind of language, Alexis. God is going to judge you for every word you say. And I'm like, judge me? What is God going to do with that motherfucker? Now listen, for the good church lady, that was one too many motherfuckers, because the next thing I knew, she was reaching for the brim of her hat. Now, let me pause real quick to just give you some context. If you grew up in a church that studied the King James Version of the Bible, then you are familiar with the modesty code, which says holy women cover their heads. Okay, push play. Mama reached for the brim of her hat, snatched off her holy, and tossed it in the back seat. And then she lifted her index finger. Now, in the Black church tradition, when you are exiting the sanctuary, you put your head down, you lift your index finger, and you walk out quietly. We in the car. She lifts her index finger, and it's like she was saying, Jesus, I'm going to be right back. And with that, she lit into me. Now, whenever I tell this story, I never disclose what she said. That's her story to tell or not tell. But when she was done, she put a finger down. She reached in the back seat to retrieve her holiness, adjusted it in the mirror, and then kept it moving. I was livid, but I wasn't cussing no more. But what I did say to her was, I can't believe that you are angry with me. You and God are mad at me, but ain't nobody got nothing to say about the lie this dude just told. It's like you've been listening to them for so long, they've got you conditioned to not even check them when they lie. But my language, now that's the problem that must be solved. She sighs this exasperated, heavy sigh. And then she, in very measured tone, says, Lex, I take in the good and I dismiss the rest of that foolishness. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking, bullshit. But I keep it in my mind, like, I want to see her. Like, she's still mama, and I'm still afraid to catch them hands. So we both just get quiet. And eventually she turns off the radio. And we continue running our errands in silence. We get back to her house. We retreat to separate corners. Mom to the back TV room and me to the kitchen. And I'm replaying everything that's happened. And, real talk, I'm feeling some kind of way. Like, did I go too hard in this situation? So when I get tired of being in my head by myself, I head to the back TV room. Mom is seated on her leather recliner. She's thumbing through a magazine. I walk up to her, bend down, kiss her forehead, and I say, Mama, I'm sorry for being disrespectful. And she says, Lex, don't be sorry. Be different. And that pissed me off even further, because what she was supposed to say was, I'm sorry too. And Lex, you are brilliant. And I appreciate that you are a critical consumer of information. I believe that it's my fault. I'm the one that took you to the library all those years when you were a little girl, made you check out and read all them books, signed you up for them summer reading programs so you kept winning all them free pizza coupons. Like, that was the script that line from the script that I had written her. And she ain't come nowhere near that. She completely ad-libbed the wrong way. don't be sorry, be different. I was like, you know what? I'm done with this. I am done with this. Until later on that evening in the dinner party, in walks my crazy auntie. She's rocking cherry Kool-Aid red cornrows, and she's still wearing her post office uniform. She comes to the space, the whole room lights up. Hey, we all yell. And so she's wading through the crowd, hugging and kissing everyone, apologizing for still being in her work clothes, but confessing, hey, if I had gone home first, I wasn't coming back out. And I worked hard today. We didn't care about none of that. We were just glad to see her. I watch her make her rounds. And when she's done, I beckon her to the back corner where I was. And so she joins me and, she's concerned. And so I start, Auntie, you won't believe what happened today. She's like, what? So we both take a seat and I began to, break down for everything that happened. And I was like, the man on the radio, he said this about President Obama. And I was like, that, and Mom was like, God's going to strike you dead. So I was giving her like all the play-by-play word-for-word accounts of what had happened. And when I was done, I said to her, Amy, what you think? She shrugs her shoulders and says, Lex, I only have one other thing to add. You was motherfucking right. My crazy auntie. Now, let me end this story with the line that I heard recently from a country western song. And I heard it as I was doing social distancing at Trader Joe's. And it was really, really cool. I like the story that the singer was telling. But in the line, he says, I believe that most people are good and most mamas ought to qualify for sainthood. Ooh. Hashtag cosign. You see, I embrace my reverent irreverence fully because of my hyper-religious mother and my candy apple red-headed crazy auntie. Everywhere they go, they show up fully and unapologetically as themselves. And they've given me permission to do the same. So, to Saint Emma and Saint Margaret, happy Mother's Day. Thank you. I love you so much. And you qualify. Both of you.
Bravo. Yay. I love it. Love you.
Love you. Love you.
Alexis, I realized last night that you actually helped me launch the whole story in 2017 as well.
Yes, with Kahindi Wiley. Yes, the Kahindi Wiley
that closing
exhibit.
weekend.
Yes,
yeah, Phoenix Art Museum with 3 others. And that was amazing. And I'm so glad that even though you moved to North Carolina, we're still connected and you
absolutely
launched the whole story online too. So we're just going to keep this trend. When we launch the whole story on the moon, I expect you to be there too.
I am there and I am so, so proud of you. Congratulations on all of this.
Thank
And
you.
just continue to grow and glow.
Thank you. All right. So before we bring the storytellers up for a final bow, I just want to invite you to stay in touch with us. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at The Whole Story Show. We'll keep you posted about future events. Maybe the moon one day, maybe not. I don't know. You never know. We're in that time. I love hearing Alexis laughing right now. And then if you're interested in being a part of The Whole Story and sharing your story on this platform, visit thewholestoryshow.com and click pitch. Maybe we'll see you on the digital stage soon, especially now that we're expanding. You can be anywhere and share your story, whether you're in London, Nigeria, Australia. We'd love to have you. I also want to give a shout out to the tech folks, Michael, Evan, Jeremy, Christian, and Marguerite. Thanks for helping things run smoothly behind the scenes. So now let's bring up our storytellers for a final bow.
It's really nice, right?
There we go. All right. So I'm sure everyone's clapping right now. Maybe we're even getting a standing ovation, but on the count of 3, let's just do a bow wherever we are. 1, 2, 3. Yay! And Mom, I want to say Happy Mother's Day to you. I love you. And even though I can't take you to Lynn's on Sunday, you will be seeing black pepper and salt shrimp in your future. Thank you for tuning in, and we will see you soon. Take care.